As NASCAR President Mike Helton gave the devastating announcement about Dale Earnhardt Sr. after the 2001 Daytona 500, the racing world stopped. You see, stunt car racing is an unforgiving sport. One day, you're on top of the world, rolling down victory lane, and the next, you're getting thrown into the wall. And although he had many triumphant moments at his time at Daytona in 2001, Dale Earnhardt Sr. suffered the worst of fates. My name is Turbo, and today I'm going to be telling you about the race that changed NASCAR forever. Now, we all know that the Daytona 500 is one of the most exciting spectacles in all of sports.
There are races and then there are races, but this is the lion of races. This is the Daytona 500.
It's the start of a new season with high hopes all around, and it also helps that it provides some of the most exciting racing that you'll ever see. But sometimes that exciting racing comes at a cost. Time and time again, drivers push too hard or lose control in the heat of the moment and cause scary collisions, especially once the race gets closer to the finish line. And the 2001 Daytona 500 is one of the most memorable and heartbreaking reminders of that. Over 20 years later, the haunting image of the number 3 car of Dale Earnhardt sliding across the banking remains. The 2001 Daytona 500 marked the beginning of a new season after Bobby Lamont came out victorious in the season prior, and the excitement began long before the estimated 150,000 fans had ever entered the venue. Bill Elliott was able to snag the pole position, and once UPS president Jim Kelly said the famous words, "Gentlemen, start your engines."
Start your engines! Race teams have worked many months for this moment to start the Daytona 500.
The race got underway. It was exactly the kind of race you'd want to see at Daytona. Earnhardt Jr. and Kurt Busch got chippy. 18 cars were eliminated in the later stages of the race in spectacular fashion. And then there was the finish. Dale Earnhardt Jr. was able to lead the race after it went green after the big one, but Waltrip took over not long after and never looked back. Earnhardt Jr. was able to keep it close, but in the final turns, it was clear that Waltrip was going to take his first Daytona 500 and first Cup Series win of his career, with his brother Darrell watching in the Fox Sports booth with tears in his eyes. Winning the Daytona 500 is crazy in and of itself, but this one in particular was pretty wild. I mean, this race was going to go down in the history books as one of the greatest Daytona 500s of all time. And while it did, it went down in history for a reason that no one would have ever hoped for. You see, just behind the race leaders, there was a bit of an accident between NASCAR legend Dale Earnhardt Sr. and Ken Schrader that all started after Earnhardt made a bit of contact with Sterling Martin and headed straight for the wall. He hit the wall hard, nose first, and the impact was just brutal. He would then be hit by Ken Schrader and would slide across the track for a little while, but the damage had already been done. After Darrell Waltrip watched his brother win, he had two emotions. First, there was pure bliss. His brother had broken the record for the longest number of starts without a win. But the other emotion made him feel uneasy. As he said,
"I just hope Dale's okay. I guess he's all right, isn't he?"
Workers tended to Earnhardt. His son, who had just finished in second, sprinted over, but it was already too late. Dale Earnhardt Sr. had already passed away. His crash had generated somewhere between 48 and 68 G's of force. And while we see crashes with an even greater force than that occasionally, more often than not, they're associated with crippling injuries. The celebratory feel around Victory Lane evaporated as the sport had just lost their biggest star.
Dale Earnhardt was killed in a high-speed crash.
The death of race car driver Dale Earnhardt.
And in Mooresville, North Carolina, fans are creating a shrine outside the shop where the 7-time Winston Cup winner created his legacy.
Earnhardt's funeral attracted thousands of mourning fans. People were distraught. But no, it couldn't be, right? Earnhardt was such a positive figure in the racing community and was a beacon of light in the sport. How could this happen? You see, Earnhardt Sr. had died of a palliser skull fracture, which takes place when someone's head moves too violently while the rest of the body stays in place. The injury just so happened to have claimed the lives of many other drivers prior to Daytona and was sorta misunderstood in the racing world. It was sad, and there needed to be a change. The crash had triggered widespread media attention, and the day started to be known as Black Sunday by some fans. But even more extreme for some, it was the day that racing had died. You see, to Dale Earnhardt, NASCAR was more of a regional sport than a national one. But once Earnhardt came up with the likes of Darrell Waltrip, Bill Elliott, and others, it spread like wildfire. Big companies were seen sponsoring drivers and their teams, and fans began to realize what they were missing. And then came the 90s, when the sport took a meteoric rise. Dale Earnhardt was dominant, winning 7 Cup Series titles through the 80s and 90s, and the drivers who came up to challenge him were getting the same treatment that he did when he was coming up. To put it shortly, Earnhardt was a national treasure and a catalyst that sent NASCAR into American households. His loss was a tragedy, and NASCAR got to work immediately. Within months, the sport tried its best to make sure that nothing of the sort ever happened again, and did their best to put the Hans device, which essentially stops a driver's head from whipping forward in a crash, to mandatory use. But even after seeing what happened to Earnhardt, some drivers were still reluctant. Mark Martin even stated, quote, "I would not wear one for anything. I'll just keep my fingers crossed and take my chances." Drivers didn't like the discomfort that the Hans device gave them, and they believed that it hindered some of their competitiveness. Plus, they were willing to put their lives on the line for it. I mean, those guys were crazy, am I right? But in October of 2001, NASCAR was able to get it done. Drivers had to wear it, whether they liked it or not. But that was just one piece to the puzzle. You see, there was also the problem of barriers, and NASCAR scrambled to solve that as well. So in 2002, the safer barrier was introduced, which was pretty much just a soft wall. The safer barriers were implemented in oval tracks and high-speed sections of other tracks. Rather than a concrete wall, the safer barriers are made of these structural steel tubes, which are then welded together. Then, in between the barrier and the wall, there's clumps of foam that further help to lessen the damage, and these days, nearly every oval that you can find has put them to good use. But of course, NASCAR also had to make some changes to the cars. And while it took some time, NASCAR finally unveiled their 5th generation car called the Car of Tomorrow that was brought into the sport in the 2007 season. The car was supposed to bring forth more exciting and competitive racing while absorbing the crashes that drivers may endure. Finally, one more investment that NASCAR decided to make was in some facilities. Just a couple of years before the Car of Tomorrow was unveiled, they had put up the NASCAR Research and Development Center, which was key to the progress the sport had made in stopping crashes and improving safety. However, all of these had been technical so far, and Earnhardt's death shook up more than just that. The response that Mark Martin gave about the Hans device is an excellent representation to how drivers thought at the time. They were rugged and walked around with a tough it out energy. Drivers didn't care about their status. They just wanted to drive and win, no matter the cost. And teams basically had the same mindset. After all, racing is a business, and so if you're not winning, it's man up or... While that part didn't change, the crash certainly sped up conversations about the safety surrounding the drivers that they had. They heavily invested in equipment and worked with the sport in order to ensure that nothing of the sort would happen to their guys. More than 2 decades after that fateful day, forward movement was clear. You see, there hadn't been a fatality in the NASCAR Cup Series since Earnhardt, and it's no coincidence. To put that into perspective, it is very impressive that in the 24-year span leading up to and including Earnhardt's death, there were only 10 fatalities. The NASCAR that we all watch today does breed the same excitement that it did back then, but there are portions that show just remnants of times past. Some past fans might argue that NASCAR has changed for the worse, but that doesn't mean that the safety shift and changes of focus that took place after the crash of Earnhardt should be ignored. As NASCAR continues to move further and further forward, it can get easier to forget certain past events, but not this one. However, even with the loss of Earnhardt Sr., many were there to pick up his legacy, and most famously his son, Dale Earnhardt Jr. When Dale Sr. died, like everyone else, Jr. was in shock. I mean, this is his father we're talking about. There were many struggles that Dale Jr. faced, such as the simple act of going back and racing at Daytona, but he more than fixed that when he won the track later that year. Racing was all he knew, though. And you see, when he found himself back on the track at Rockingham just 1 week after the incident, he couldn't imagine himself anywhere else.
Dale Earnhardt's son will race again today, 1 week after the crash had killed his father at the Daytona 500.
At the start, he could barely function when talking about his dad. In 2001, when fans rallied behind Dale Sr. and voted him in as the most popular driver, Dale Jr. struggled with the reality that he needed to accept the award. Years passed and tributes were given, but the burden of the legacy of Dale Sr. was still almost too much to handle. But as time passed, Jr. began to heal and decided to do anything that he could to protect the legacy of his father. In fact, in an interview with ESPN in 2016, he stated, quote, "If I never do anything in this sport, what matters to me is that his legacy is what it is, and that it stays that way." He's given stories about his interactions with his father, which have shown that what you saw with Dale Sr. was what you got. And I mean, becoming a Hall of Fame NASCAR driver in and of itself should warrant the preservation of his dad's legacy, even if he never became a Cup Series champ. Only time will tell how Earnhardt's legacy will sustain itself, but if not for him, the NASCAR that we know and love would never be the same. This was the race that changed NASCAR forever. My name's Turbo. Thanks for watching, guys, and be sure to like and subscribe to be ready for more NASCAR content.